Myself, Pradeep Kumar Tripathi. I have taken the lecture of DBMS. This is beneficial for the CSIT student in the 5th semester. And we started the topic of ER diagram, how ER diagram can be implemented in particular database, and how we can create the table for the reference of ER diagram. ER diagram in a database basically used for the mapping of the entities. What is entities in the context of DBMS? One thing is entity, another is relationship. So what do you mean by entity? Entity means that that can be exist in the real world things is called entity. Suppose class is an entity, person is an entity, animal is an entity. That means things that can be exist in particular environment, that is called entity, and these entities can be connected with through the relationship. So if any entity that can be mapped to the relationship, it is called entity relationship diagram, that comes under the ER diagram. So ER diagram stands for the entity relationship model. It is a high level language data model. It defines the data elements and relationship for the specific system. We can also create a particular prototype or conceptual design for the database for our projects. Suppose we have any person can work in a company, and the company user gives the requirement for the his project. So the person can map the ER diagram for the particular scenario. So let's see how the ER diagram can be drawn and how the ER diagram can be converted into the tables in the particular DBMS. So let's start from the beginning of the ER diagram. So I already discussed about the entity and relationship. It develops a conceptual design for the database. It develops design view of the data. For the example, suppose we have a designer for the school database. So what type of entity in the particular school? In the school, first entity is college or oblique school. Whatever else you have work over there. Another is student. Either it is in college, either it is in school. Another is faculty. These are the three entities that can be mapped in the particular. These are the three entities that can be mapped in the school database, either college database. So if some people are taking the entity parent also in a particular scenario. So these are the four tentative entities that comes under the school database, and in this school database you can map these entities between them. These are called the relationship between the school database. In this example, we can map that particular student to the college, faculty to the college, and parent to the college. This is called ER diagram of any particular scenario. Suppose we have a ER diagram of student. In a ER diagram of student, we can draw like this. This rectangular box represents the student as an entity, and in the student they have an attribute like name, address, ID and age. These are the called attributes of that particular student. This is the basic diagram of any student that can have a entity. So it is called ER diagram of particular student. In this, there are some certain features are there. One is primary key or prime attribute. Primary key, either it is called prime attribute also. In this particular ER diagram, suppose we have to map the particular prime attribute of that student entity. What is the prime attribute of student entity? Name, address, ID and age. There are four attributes are there, but in the name it may be possible names are duplicates address, it may be same to the particular two students, and age is also same for the two student or more than two students. So ID is the only attribute that we can map as a primary key. In this particular scenario, we can in this particular scenario we can use ID as a primary key, and this underline shows the ID is the primary key of this particular ER diagram. So it is a basic ER diagram of a student we can map over there. Now next, component of ER diagram, how we can draw the ER diagram. So let's go down the depth of ER diagram. ER diagram is categorized into the three parts. One is entity, attribute and relation. What is entity? Entity comes under the two parts. One is weak entity, another is strong entity. Strong entity means an entity that can be easily easily understandable. That is called strong entity that can be exist in an environment. In the weak entity, we cannot sure about that particular entity is an entity, or either it is relation, either it is attribute. So at that case, we can draw as a weak entity. Then comes under the attribute. These are the attribute type that can be drawn in particular ER diagram. So it is attribute, key attribute, composite attribute, multi-value attribute and derived attribute. Let's discuss one by one. What is key attribute? Key attribute is the attribute that can be identify the records of the table or records of the database. So it is called key attribute. Composite attributes means we can combine two attributes as a, suppose we have a two attribute A and B. So we can combine A and B as a primary attribute or prime attribute. It is called composite attribute. What do you mean by multi-value attribute? Multi-value attribute matlab attribute that can have a multi-value. Suppose we have a student and we have a student entity. We have a student entity and their attribute is mobile number. So mobile number is a multi-value attribute because a student can have a more than one mobile number also. A person can have a more than one mobile number. So it is called multi-value attribute. That means attribute that can have a more than one value. So it is called multi-value attribute. And we can denote about multi-value attribute. We can denote it by, suppose student have a mobile number and we can have a multi-value attribute. This is called multi-value attribute. We can circle again. So this is called multi-value attribute. Suppose we have discussed about the derived attribute. What is a derived attribute? Suppose student has an attribute that is called DOB, and DOB is an attribute that is simple attribute, normal attribute, and student has a, suppose, attribute age. So how age can be calculated? The age can be calculated by the DOB. So it can be derived from the DOB, then age is called derived attribute. How it can be drawn? We can draw by using like this. Dotted lines are there in this oval. So it is called derived attribute. Suppose we have a attribute that has underline or circle by the dotted lines, then dotted lines shows that that particular attribute is called derived attribute. So these are the four attributes that can be discussed in particular ER diagram. So next part is relationship. How it is relationship can be maintained in particular ER diagram. The relationship is called relation between two entities or more than two entities. So relation can be a type of one-to-one or can be a type of one-to-many, one-to-many-to-one and many-to-many. Suppose one-to-one, one-to-many and many to one, and many to many. These are the relations that can be used in particular ER diagram. So, it is a basic of a ER diagram or component of ER diagram that can be drawn in a particular scenario. So, how it can be defined and how it can be represented in particular diagram. So, first part is entity. What is entity? Entity may be an object, may be a person, may be in a class, maybe a place or some other things that can be exist in a particular environment. That is called entity, and it comes under the ER diagram and it represented by a rectangular. If any entity or any object or any class, any person or anything that can draw within the rectangular box, it is called entity in particular ER diagram. Suppose an organization has a manager, product, employee, department. There are so many entities are there in particular organizations. So, this is called normal entity is called a strong entity, but how weak entity can be shown? Weak entity is an entity that does not contain any key attributes of its own. The weak entity is represented by double rectangular. So, loan is called strong entity and installment is called weak entity. So, this is the difference between two entities. One is strong entity and another is weak entity. Weak entity is an entity that comes under the, that has no prime attribute or that does not have a primary attribute or key attribute of that particular object. Next part is attribute. What is attribute? The attribute is used to describe the property of an entity and we can represent it by the eclipse of that particular attribute. So, suppose student, I have taken an example of student and student have a ID, name, age and phone numbers. There are so many attributes are there, but we can mention overall only 4 attributes in particular scenario. So, these are the called attribute ID, phone number, age, name, and here we can mention ID as a primary key. We can underline that particular ID by the line. So, it is called prime attribute of that particular situation. So, attribute can be described the property of an entity is called attribute. So, it is called attribute and the attribute can be divided into the 4 parts that I have already discussed about the key attribute, composite attribute, multi-value attribute and derived attribute we have discussed, and these are the definition we can mention over here. Suppose key attribute, the key attribute is used to represent the main characteristics of an entity, and how about the composite attribute? The composite attribute is the composed of many other attributes known as composite attributes. Multi-value, more than one value, and derived attribute that can be derived from the another attribute. I have already discussed about this. So, let us move on. This is the ER diagram. Suppose the student had more than one phone numbers. I have already discussed. This is called multi-value attribute. Multi-value attribute, and this is called derived attribute. This is student, this has the name, birth date, roll number, age. Age can be calculated from the birth date. So, it is comes under the birth date to age. So, age is called derived attribute. So, here the representation of derived attribute. Now, the relationship we can discuss. Relationship means describe the relation between the entities. It can be shown by the diamond or rhombus to represent the relationship. Relationship can be a category of the 4 types: one to one, one to many, many to one, and many to many. Suppose we have discussed about one to one relation. How one to one relation are there? The only one instance of the entity is associated with the another entity, then it is called one to one relationship. Suppose we have example of male and female. So, one female married to the one male, it is called simple one to one relationship. One-to-many relationship when only one instance of the entity of the left hand side and more than one instance of the entity that is right side associate with the relationship is known as one-to-many relationship. Suppose we have an example of scientists invent the many inventions, because one scientist have only one invention, it is also possible, but one scientist has invented more than one things, it is also possible. So it relation shows the one to many relationship. Suppose we have mention over here 1 and right hand side mention over m, so it is called one to many relationship. Now next is many to one relationship when more than one instance of the entity on the left hand side, only one instance of the entity of the right side associated with the relationship is known as many to one relationship. The student enrolls the only one course, but course have a many student. This is the example of many to one relationship. Student can enroll only the course, but the course has the relationship between the student is one to many. This is the representation of many to one relationship. And many to many relationship, how it can be shown? It can be shown about m to m. We can represent over m to m. That means employee many relationship is with the project. So this is the relationship about the one to one and one to many and many to many. These are the some symbols that can be used in particular ER diagram. So there are notations, but basic notations are clear, but some notations are there in relationship. We can discuss about one to one, that is shown by the simple line, and one to many like this. We can draw like this and we can draw like this, that is called one to many. Here similarly many to one to many, and only one relationship, either zero relationship, either zero to many. We can draw like this. In the particular this scenario, we can represent in the project and employee relationship with the company. We can shown about the 0 to 1, 0 to many, many to 1, many to many. These are the relationship that can be drawn in the ER diagram. So it is the basic structure of a ER diagram that can be discussed in particular ER diagram scenario. Suppose we can draw a simple ER diagram of college. So how it can be drawn? It can be drawn like this. Suppose we have a college, an entity, and we have also an entity. Suppose we have an entity of faculty, employee. Suppose employee, EMP, employee, and we can connect it over faculty like this. And we have also the entity, one entity, that is student. We can draw over student. Here is employee and here is entity. Student, suppose enrollment. Then we can draw over this is the attribute. We can draw. This is the attribute. We can draw. We can draw. We can draw. And we can also draw the attribute of main entity also. We can derived entry also. So this is the basic structure of a particular ER diagram of the college. We can so suppose we have a faculty and attribute of faculty ID, faculty courses, faculty salary, faculty address. There are lots of numbers of there. So we can use in particular ER diagram. We can this. We can have a college ER diagram, and this particular ER diagram we can college ID or college code, college address, and that can be relationship with the student, student ID, student course, student sections. There are so many things are there that can be mapped into the ER diagram also. So it is the basic of ER diagram which can be represented by the symbols. So if got the any scenario or situation in a particular organization, we can draw that particular ER diagram for scenario. And what is the purpose of ER diagram to draw? The purpose of ER diagram is basically it is a roadmap to for the tables. Suppose we have a database and we want to create some tables for the projects. How we can draw the tables? How can we map particular tables? Because we don't know how many tables are there in particular database. So ER diagram that can be help to create a table in a particular database. Suppose we have a project and we have some user requirements. How it can be drawn? We can draw first of all ER diagram, then we can reduce that particular ER diagram into the tables. How it can be reduced? It can be reduced like this. Suppose we have a entity of faculty, college and student. So in this particular ER diagram, we can draw 3 tables. We can create 3 tables in a particular database: faculty, college and student. And there are attributes are in the, suppose we have a entity of faculty. In the particular faculty entity, we can create attributes. How many attributes are there? So 1, 2, 3 and 4. So in the faculty table, we have 4 columns. In a college table, we have 2 columns. In a student table, we have draw only 3 attributes, so 3 columns. So it like this, we can draw from ER diagram to tables. So this is the basic purpose of ER diagram, to map our tables. Now next is mapping constraints. Suppose we have got the scenario from any organization, any college, any user requirement, we can draw particular ER diagram and we can particular ER diagram to convert it into the tables. But in the particular table, when we convert it into the table, there are some constraints are there. What do we make constraint? Constraint means that particular condition in which we can create particular tables. So conditions are in the table level, either it is mapping constraint, either it is user requirement constraints. So there are some constraint in the particular mapping. So discuss about the mapping constraint in a particular DBMS. Suppose DBMS is a basically software that can be controlled to the creation of database, updating of database, deletion of the database. Either it can be created the tables of the database and it can be managed by the SQL. What is SQL? SQL is a structured query language that can be used for the creating the tables. So cardinalities in a particular mapping constraints are there. What is cardinalities? Cardinality means entities are connected to each other. How many relationship structures are there and how many numbers of entities connected to particular another entities. So this is called cardinalities. How mappings are there, how connected are, how entities are connected, how it can be arranged in particular such a manner. So this is called cardinality. Here is a definition, how the entities are arranged to each other and what is the relationship structure between the entities in a relationship set. This is called a definition of the particular cardinality. But basic meaning is only the connections of entities with each other and how they are arranged with relationship between each other. This cardinality contains some ratio and that ratio can be helped to manage the entities. So we can calculate the cardinality ratio. Cardinality ratio means cardinality mapping, which represents the mapping of one entity to another entity in the particular relationship set. Suppose we have taken the example of binary relationship set. So in the binary relationship set, 2 entities are mapped with each other. So there are some cases in particular database. Suppose we have some examples are there. Suppose we want to track the purchase history of each customer, then we can use the one-to-many cardinality to find the data of a specific customer. The cardinality models can be used in database by database manager for the variety of the purpose, but in the corporations often use it is evaluating the customer or inventory of the customer. So there are some types of the cardinality mapping in a particular database scenario, that as the mapping constraint 1 to 1, 1 to many to 1, 1 to many and many to many. These are the also called cardinality of the particular ratio. So in ER diagram we can discuss about the how the ER diagram can be drawn, how entities are connected with each other, how the relationship can be maintained, how the constraints are there and constraint cardinalities, and we have discussed about there are some certain types of cardinalities are there. So this is the all about the ER diagram, and how ER diagram can be connected, how ER diagram can be mapped. Suppose we have some requirements from the user, we can easily draw the ER diagram of particular scenario, and we can easily convert that particular ER diagram to the tables. And we can also calculate the cardinality ratio of that particular ER diagram. So this is about the ER diagram. But in this ER diagram, some missings are there, some oops concepts are missing. But some concepts, if we add in ER diagram some concepts, then it is called extended ER diagram. So what is extended ER diagram? In the extended ER diagram, it is represented by ER diagram. So what is extended ER diagram? It can be comes under the ER diagram plus some features which can be added in this particular scenario. So it is a ER diagram and we can add some features. What are the features are there when we can add in this particular ER diagram? The features are generalization, aggregation and specialization. These are the three features which can be added to particular ER diagram to maintain our extended ER diagram. So extended ER diagram, what is extended ER diagram? Extended ER diagram is the combination of ER diagram plus some functionalities are there. What is the functionality? That is generalization, specialization and aggregation. We can discuss in next lecture series for the extended ER diagram. Thank you everyone.